I don't know why working with a tripod is so difficult to me, but it is. But anyway, that is not what I'm here to talk about today. Also, I decided to go on a nail journey and do my own builder gel. And I know these don't look like anything special, especially compared to what I had before. But to the haters, I would say, have you tried to do it yourself? Because it's really, really hard. Okay? I definitely went in so confident. I was like, I was overconfident, okay? I will fully admit. And this is no shade to the girl who was doing my nails before. Mars, you are my everything. And I thought I was a visual learner. So I was like, I've watched her do this multiple times now. I can do this. Watched YouTube, watched TikTok, learned it all, bought all the supplies from someone's Amazon shop. I really thought that I had it all going for me. And then the minute I turned on that drill, do you know how scary it is to use that drill on yourself, first of all? Second of all, it just like did not go as smoothly as planned. And then as you start doing things, I think this goes with everything. Like you start doing something and then you're like, I actually have a million more questions, which is like kind of leading into what I was going to talk about today, the book I was going to talk about. But also like, have you ever been in like a job situation and they're like, do you have any questions? And you're like, nope, because you don't have any questions until you start doing it, because that's how I feel. I start doing it and then I'm like, oh my God, I have so many questions. But I am also a perfectionist and also can't admit my own faults. So I literally would rather die than ask someone a question. Which is so funny because I feel like my best friend Caitlin is a really good question asker. And I'm not. Like, she always compares me to her boyfriend and to boys in general, because you know when a guy tells you like, oh, so-and-so broke up, and you're like, what, how, where, when, why? And they're like, I don't know, I just know they broke up. That is me. Because if someone tells me something, it's not that I don't care. It's like if someone tells me, oh my God, we broke up, I'm like, whoa, are you okay? Like, how do you feel? And then I just get that detail, but I never get the details of the whole situation as well. That is my bad. I guess I'll add that to my list of things to try and do better about on 2025. But anyway, I have been on a journey that I am going to read at least one book a week. And I decided that it's not going to be all nonfiction. I love my silly little fantasy books for getting me back into reading last year, and I just realized like reading really is the one thing that brings me so much joy. But I am also trying to become a better person, and I'm also at a really weird phase in my life where I'm like, I'm 31, I've been doing my same job. Not my same job. I've worked for 3 different companies, but I've been working in footwear product for over 10 years now. And I'm just kind of like, this can't be it. The other big thing that they don't tell you is like, you know, you're supposed to work up and keep climbing this corporate ladder and keep getting to a different point. And I'm a global product line manager right now. I'm soon to be senior, so I'm told. But that's not even important to me, because I feel like the other thing is you're told you want to get to director, get to like senior director, get to president. And then as you do start moving up, you start becoming responsible for people. Like I have a team of 3 underneath me now, and I'm very lucky because all 3 of them are very easy to train, very easy to manage. Like they're all very self-sufficient, and I feel like they're all like very understanding of who I am as a manager. Like I'm not a micromanager, and I honestly think I have a lot of leadership qualities, but I don't think I'm a director. Like I don't think I possess those skills that are necessary. And so I decided that 2025 is the year that I figure out what I'm gonna do, because I don't think it's fair to anyone for me to become a director and then not really want it. Like, that's what makes you a bad leader, in my opinion, is not realizing you're not meant to be a people leader. maybe you're meant to be a leader in your space, in your career, in your, whatever field you're in. That doesn't necessarily mean you're meant to manage a team of people. And so that reality is what's really amped up this journey of trying to figure out what's next, because I'm like, this is no longer just about me now. This is definitely about, like, I am responsible for other people and I need to figure it out. Sorry, I'm back. I had to get chapstick because I also, in 2025, am deciding to be not a mouth breather anymore. I am a mouth breather at night. I'm not gonna lie to you. I feel like I cannot get enough air through my nose. It's not like a weird thing. Well, I guess it is a weird thing, so I'm learning with all this mouth tape shit that's coming out now, but I have been training myself to breathe through my nose, and I did it for the last couple nights, but I got hit so hard with that neurovirus. Oh my God. I'm a woman. Like, I can handle a sickness. I work from home, so I usually still work when I'm sick. Not yesterday. Oh my God. First of all, I read fantasy books, so my fever dreams were fever dreaming. Oh my God. I was like riding dragons. I had powers. I was in Dune trying to do the sandwalk. I already told her this, but Caitlin was there doing it with me, and she kept saying, "You're doing it wrong. You're gonna call the worm." She was like this. And of course she was like perfect at it. And I was like, I'm doing the same thing. Anyways, that's not what today is about. That is just my aside. I don't even remember how I started talking about me being sick. The first book that I'm going to talk about this year that I had read is called The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck. And I found Martha Beck because I do the To Be Magnetic work. I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with it. In my mind, it's very mainstream. Like, I feel like a lot of people have heard about it. I heard about it in 2020. It's like manifestation work, basically. And before you're like, whoa, it's actually really not. Because, I mean, while like things have come to fruition for me since I've started doing it, I feel like the main thing that's come to fruition for me since I started it in 2020 is like a better understanding of like why you feel like certain situations keep happening to you. And I think now it's so mainstream, like manifestation, subconscious work. Their process really is all about like being you. So you can tell your subconscious stories that you're keeping to yourself that they're not real. And not that they're not real, but just like the little things we all tell each other. Like I tell each other. Hopefully no one's telling you bad things about yourself. But like, for instance, for me, I grew up, I'm Egyptian. I look very different from everyone I grew up with. I grew up in Southern California in like White Town, USA, which is great. All my friends were great. People were great, whatever. But I thought I was ugly because I just didn't look like anyone else. So I have definitely come to realize that like a lot of the way I see myself is the reason why things manifest into my reality the way that they do. And a lot of it has helped my self-confidence a lot too. I feel like there's just so many little examples I could give about that and just like, every aspect of your life. But anyway, that's how I found Martha Beck, because TBM also does yearly challenges, and like the challenge is just basically like they kind of put together some of their meditations and like do a whole process, and they have like a daily and weekly routine for you just to help you kind of get a routine down, because I feel like it's really hard to work that stuff into your daily life sometimes. But one for December and January this year was all about authenticity. And this is kind of what I'm talking about. It's like, they're not like, oh, it's a manifestation challenge. This was an authenticity challenge. So it was 2 months of them putting together basically like a course for you to follow of like finding out who you are at your core and what you want. Because I think a lot of times we think about what we want, right? Like exactly what I was talking about in the beginning. Like you think about, if you would have asked me like, even 5 years ago, if you asked me when I was at Vans like 8 years ago and they were like, what do you want to do? I would have said, I want to be president of Vans one day. Like that was genuinely my dream. Like I loved working on product. I loved working there. And like, yeah, things happened and I moved on and I grew up and like, that's not my dream anymore. But I didn't, speak into reality that I want to be president and then become president. Like, that actually wasn't true to who I want to be. And it took me a long time to get to the point where I realized, like, oh, okay, like, admitting out loud, and especially on the internet, that, like, I don't want what is seen as the next step in my career is really scary. Like, my parents would probably, like, what are you doing? Like, you literally worked this hard to get this far, and then now you're admitting to the world you don't want the next step. But that's not what's right for me. And so I have really been trying to figure out what's right for me, and Martha is like the perfect person for that. And they brought her on the podcast that they do every week during this authenticity challenge, because they talk about it as authenticity and who you are, and they have this whole thing where it's called your authentic code, and basically you like figure out 4 key words that are like what you should make decisions through in your daily life because they're for your core authentic self. Martha talks about the authentic self as like your true integrity. Like, everything in her book is about finding your way to your true integrity and kind of getting rid of all of the societal programming that we have around that. And she's the best example of that. Like, just to give a little bit of her backstory, she talks a little bit about it in this book, but she has a whole other book that's on like her true life story, which I will probably read now, because also I listened to this one and she reads the audiobook and she is so funny. And it's not, this is where self-help books get so hard, because sometimes they're so dense. Like, they're so, like, academic. Like, I don't know. That, to me, like, not to diagnose anyone, but sometimes when you read a self-help book and it's so in your face, I'm like, why? Like, what about that is making me want to do that? And maybe that's just, like, who I am as a person now. I used to be, like, so go get 'em, and now I'm just not. So maybe that's why. But I'll tell you about Martha, and then I'll pull up my notes. So anyway, Martha Beck, she basically was raised Mormon. Her father was someone who was really prominent in the Mormon church. A lot of people said he like saved their lives. Like, she grew up Mormon, got married really young to someone. They had a great relationship. They had a child. That's her oldest daughter. It was great. And then she was going to get like her double PhD, whatever, like pursuing much higher education. So was her husband. So she was working hard. And then she got pregnant with her second child, and her second child was diagnosed in the womb with having extreme autism, I believe. I'm gonna double check. But her second son was diagnosed with having an extreme disability, and doctors were telling her, you should abort this. This is like, he's not gonna have a life. Like, this isn't gonna be the life of a person. This isn't a humane life that he's gonna live. It's not a full life he's gonna live. So the kind thing for you to do is to abort it. And she was raised Mormon, obviously, and like, if you know a lot about Mormon churches, or even about like any kind of religion, I feel like follows this, abortion is very much frowned upon, I would think, in most religions. Like, I grew up Christian. I feel like that is a huge no-no in the Christian church. But also, I mean, for a lot of people, it's just like what you believe in. Like, do you believe everything happens for a reason? I think you feel it deep in your soul. And she felt like at that time, like, the people in the Mormon church and the doctors that were telling her to abort, the people in the Mormon church basically saw it as like a sin, that this child was not going to be fully whole. And then the doctors were also telling her something really similar, like saying like, this isn't going to be a life. Like, this isn't a life worth keeping. But she felt deep in her soul like, no, this is a life worth keeping. This is for me. And so she did have the baby. And she actually had like psychic experiences with the baby. And she says in her book, like, he ended up being her greatest teacher. Like, raising a child that does have such a steep disability ended up being the thing that like really led her discovering her own authenticity and her own integrity. I feel like having a child with Down syndrome is what created this thought in her head of like, is all of this worth it? Like, is all of this what I'm supposed to be doing? So in her book, she kind of goes through the entire book in relation to Dante's Inferno, which I thought was really fascinating because while I love that kind of stuff, I like don't yet have the propensity to like read something like that. After reading her book though, and like hearing how she explains it, now I really want to read Dante's Inferno. But so the first part of the book that she talks about is really that suffering when you're out of your integrity is really physical and mental. She suffered a lot of like physical ailments that the doctors are kind of like chronic illness, like you'll just live with this forever. And then once she started actually like working through her problems and working towards what she really wanted, she realized like she was feeling so much better. And this leads me into what I am going to read in February, and like literally as someone who claims to do the work and like be a healthy person and whatever else I claim to be, I have not read The Body Keeps the Score, and I feel like that is such a classic in the self-help world, and I feel like it truly does keep the score. Like your body will tell you when something is wrong, and like, even me getting sick this week, I literally haven't taken a day off of, like, working out in some way, shape, or form in probably 3 weeks. And, like, I mean, I've taken days off. Like, last week, we had a team day where we went and kayaked in the morning, and then we went and did a team hike in the afternoon. And, like, yeah, was that, like, me going to a Soul Cycle class? No. But I still didn't give my body rest. And so I think, like, I get sick usually when I need rest. And I also had a really stressful week at work last week. And then, like, with the Monday being off, I didn't get a lot of rest on Tuesday because, like, work, you know, when you miss one day of work, they just kind of cram it in. Is brought to you by my second to last Cran Fizz Poppy. I'm so sad. Rest, that's a seasonal flavor. It talks about everything going through Dante's Inferno, and there's like different stages and there's different gates that you get to, and the first one is the Dark Wood of Error. Basically in the Dark Wood of Error, it's exactly kind of what it sounds like. It's like a dark forest, and I think we've all been in this. I am definitely in this right now. I think I'm towards the end of the path in the Dark Wood, but have you ever been in that part of your life where you're like, literally nothing is going right? I am trying so hard and nothing is going right. And I feel like that is exactly what the Dark Wood of Error is like, I'm the type of person, and this is again attributed to a lot of that TBM stuff and just growing up Christian. I feel like the way I look at God and my relationship with spirituality is so different than how I was raised, but I still believe there is a God, you know? But I firmly believe if you are pushing and shoving your way and it's the wrong path, you will continually be shoved off of it. I can even give an example of this, and this is again very vulnerable because I obviously still work in my industry, but I'm not ashamed to like say any of this stuff because I don't know what's next for me. Like, even in my career so far, all of the jobs that I have held have not existed before I've held them. So, like, I feel pretty confident saying this stuff, knowing that whatever is meant for me is, like, literally going to just come to me. But, like, if you're not following yourself and your truth, you will be shoved off the path. Like, there's no other way to say it. And it's for your own good. Like, even in my current job, I work from home, I'm chilling, love my team, I love my job, I have a really fun job, I get paid well, no complaints, seemingly no complaints. I would probably just chill in this job for a long time, but I feel like there are bigger things out there for me in the world, and I know that deep in my soul, but I am also a very tired, lazy person deep in my soul. So I am experiencing things where I will be shoved off of this path if I do not make actions myself. For instance, they're making us all return to office. You're probably like, that's not that big a deal. I live 2.5 hours away from my office, and I will not be moving to where my office is because it is much more expensive to live there, and it is farther from all of my friends and all of my family, and that is just not something I'm willing to compromise at this point. So you gotta figure that out. She also has this thing that she talks about in there called the mood monster, which I have definitely fallen prey to the mood monster. I mean, when you feel like you have absolutely no purpose in life and your job drives you up the wall. I mean, I have multiple chats with different friends in different industries, and it's just like, when you are in something that is no longer meant for you, and that doesn't mean it wasn't meant for you at one time. This job that I am currently in was my dream. Like, being in this industry, working my way up, making this salary, having a team, this was my dream. Like, little Ashley, who loved fashion and loved, doing stuff like that, but wasn't a designer and didn't know where to go from there, and didn't even know this job existed. This was her dream, and I made it there. But the person I am now is the type of person that can't really stand working long hours anymore. I'm just tired and doesn't really want to because, my parents are getting really old. I kind of want to focus on spending time with them. My brother has 2 kids. I want to focus on having more family time and traveling to see them. I've been super lucky to be able to travel all over the world, but I am 31 and I'm single, and a lot of that is attributed to the fact that I never prioritized my dating life. And because any emotional capacity that I have left at the end of the day is put towards me trying to relax. And then I go straight back into work. And I'm just not the type of person that can do half and half. So that is a huge factor in like whatever I choose to do next. And that's the person I am now. If you would have asked me like 5 or 6 years ago, I'm an Aries. I never shut up about being an Aries because I feel like that was my personality. I was literally a ball of fire going down the mountainside, taking everything with me. And that's just not a sustainable lifestyle for me anymore. If anyone knows anything about human design, I am a projector, and projectors need a lot of rest. So some may say that's lazy. I'm using the excuse, sorry. She also talks about like wanting versus yearning as you try to figure out what is really your integrity. And I feel like this is the biggest part of the journey. For everybody. But as you go through the dark wood of error, this is really the biggest part of it, is like figuring out what you actually want. And like that is the other big part about starting to do self-help work and spiritual work, is trying to figure out like, who am I and what do I want? And does this exercise where it's like how to figure out like if it's society telling you what you want or if it's you telling you what you want. And so think about something that you think you really want, and then think about like why you really want it. And I thought about a new car because I drive a Tacoma. I love my car. I bought it with my own money. It was like the car I took camping, snowboarding. It was in my go days of my action sports adventure girly pop days. And I love that car. It's a great car. There's nothing wrong with it. I have paid it off in full. The new Land Cruisers that came out from Toyota, I saw them and I was like, I don't know if I'm really a truck girly anymore because I don't do a ton of that stuff anymore. And those are really cute. They're also very expensive. And do I want a new car because I want a new car, or do I want a new car because the world is showing me this new shiny new item and telling me I should want a new car? And that kind of goes back to marketing and how all of society propagandas us into thinking we want stuff. TikTok, I love TikTok, but man, oh man, are people trying to fucking sell you shit on TikTok and Instagram. And this is where she always talks about finding soul teachers. Like, your soul will find a way to show you what you want and to guide you to that path. But you have to learn how to discern what's a marketing propaganda and what's actually a soul teacher. So, like, perfect example of this, and this is no shade to anyone I'm about to talk about, I'm just going to use them as examples. Lauren Bostic, she is self-made, obviously very well off, very like accomplished in her career and being an influencer, and like has all these products. I've listened to Skinny Confidential, him and hers, for a long time. They have amazing guests. Like, I definitely valued it. In the last couple of years for me, I haven't really been able to take anything that she says seriously because I feel like she jumped ship on all the stuff she's trying to sell you. And so it's hard for me as a person to be like, okay, you're selling me on like beef tallow, and then the next week you're like, I'm a vegan. Like, she's never said that, but I'm just saying, like, that's how it feels to me. I'm getting whiplash from some of her content. But like, on the other hand, someone who, whenever I listen to their podcasts or like I read their books or things like that and they speak to me, is Nikki Novo. Like, she's an intuitive, she's a spiritual guider, she like does all these workshops. When I see her books, like, I could literally flip her book open to a random page or see like a post from her on Instagram and have just been crying about something, and it literally is like, here's what you were crying about. And I'm like, and not in the way that it's giving me an answer. It's just like, oh, you might be distressed about this because of, you know, something like XYZ in your subconscious, so you should look at that. And I'm like, I should look at that. Thank you so much for that. So that's a big thing that she talks about, like, because I think a lot of us are like, okay, cool. You get to the dark wood of error is kind of what she talks about. And then you're like, well, I don't know where to go. I know I don't want to be here, but I don't know where to go. And the only way to figure out that path is following your integrity. And a lot of following your integrity is trying to figure out what's the fluff society tells us and what's not. This phase is the gates of hell. Which I actually might be in this phase, to be quite honest, because then you start going through the phase of like, things start shedding out of your life once you find your integrity. Friends will shed out of your life. Relationships will shed out of your life. Maybe family members will shed out of your life. I feel like there's so many things that we hang on to because they're familiar, but they're not necessarily good for us. And that is kind of going through the gates of hell. And that's a really hard thing to go through. Like, I went through a very hard friendship breakup about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years ago now. I actually don't remember, but that was really hard for me. And I think it's funny because I think if everyone takes a moment, especially when you're in your late 20s to early 30s, you take a moment and you think to yourself, like, everyone has had that one relationship or situation that's kind of just like rocked their world. I've never really been in a serious relationships, but for me, that friendship, now that I can look back on it in retrospect, was kind of like a toxic relationship. The way we treated each other, the way we interacted with each other, like, I'm not saying it's her fault or my fault. It's just I think we were here to teach each other a lesson, and I hope she feels the same. Like, I have no hard feelings, but it's really, really hard. The other thing that she always tells you in the book is to like take a step back and think to yourself, because a lot of like the thoughts that we have are really painful. And she's like, you have to think to yourself, are these painful thoughts true? And then you ask yourself, are you sure they're true? Can you know they're true? And I think that's really refreshing because we're really not taught to feel anything or to let the negativity in and acknowledge it. Like, a lot of manifestation stuff, what not TBM, is like, don't
stay in the vortex, stay in the positivity.
But like TBM is very much like, negativity, you need to dig deep into that. Like, you need to root into that and you need to feel into that. And as someone who tends to lead very avoidant with their feelings, learning how to like say it's okay to feel and sit with these feelings was really pivotal for me in figuring out a lot of different things in my life. She also talks about the way she kind of went about finding her integrity was she decided she wasn't going to tell a lie for a whole year. And in doing so, she basically realized she doesn't want to be in the Mormon church anymore, which you can imagine rocked her fucking world. She realized that she was not straight, so that also rocked her world because she had a family. Luckily, her husband ended up not being straight either, and they have a seemingly great relationship from how she describes it with their kids. She also realized she didn't want to be doing what she was doing because the Mormon church was preventing her from talking about a lot of the research that she was doing, and other people too, not just her. And she didn't feel like that was right because she felt like you shouldn't skew all of this research, like people deserve to know the truth, basically. And so in doing all of this, she basically found an entire new life. But you can imagine, she got shunned from her family, from the Mormon church. She also talks about like realizing that she was sexually assaulted by her own father, who was seen as this like amazing person in their religion and, you know, did this horrible thing to her. And people just wanted to brush it under the rug. She actually got hate for people saying she was ruining the Mormon church, which I'm like, how do you blame the child? Like, that is so beyond comprehension to me. But also does this really great exercise about figuring out what's that part inside of you that's kind of self-sabotaging and keeps going back to those things that you know deep down aren't good for you. And you kind of hold out both of your palms and you imagine like a little animal in one and then your like angry self in the other, and they kind of go at it. And I feel like that was really helpful to me because I am someone who, like I said in the beginning, like I grew up thinking I was not anything special. Like I was like, I'm the ugly duckling, like nobody likes me, I will never have a relationship. That has manifested in so many ways in my life, but luckily not in my career. I don't know how I escaped that part. Probably because my parents always instilled in me, like, you can do anything you set your mind to, until I switched out of pre-med, and then they were like, that wasn't exactly what we were talking about, but I ended up successful, so now they're like, that was what we were talking about. Anyway, I digress. I feel like I grew up thinking I just had no looks, and so I definitely, whenever I feel myself sliding back into bad habits, my bad habits, that little like fox is seeking the same thing that is that angry version of myself. Like I imagined like a little tiny fox, and it was just like sad, like it was scared, it was sad, it just wanted love. And like my angry self is mad at the fox for, you know, eating too much or not working out or like doing this, doing that, picking your face, not dressing cute, like the list goes on, and it's mainly looks for me because that's just like my core wounding. But anyway, they both just want the same thing at the end of the day. Like the fox is seeking comfort in whatever way it knows, and then the angry self is angry at it because it wants the comfort that it knows is out there. And so it's really just acknowledging that, and those are your shadow parts if you do any of that kind of work. And that's just like really trying to help you see like, yeah, maybe you don't want to go down those paths anymore, and so you can speak to those parts inside of you too. The other big thing she talks about, so I kind of talked about this too with her experience of people attacking her for saying her father sexually assaulted her, which was the truth. When you start to go against the grain, people are going to start to attack you. Like, for instance, I feel like I could come on here and I could say like 9-to-5s are a prison. Like, that's how I feel sometimes, okay? Like I said, I, for the most part, love my job and love the people I work with. But there's times where I'm like, oh my God, this feels like way too much. Like, this is so insane. I could come on here and say like, that's not the way we should be living. We should be living these 4-day work weeks, and we should be like doing all this stuff, and people will fucking come at you. Especially, I think we've learned this in the day and age of the internet. Am I right? Because like, you see people, if you have a controversial take, people will attack you for it. And that is something that you kind of have to prepare for, is like the wrong people will fall away and the right people will come to you. And it's going to be hard. Like, you're going to face some adversity. I don't think just because it's the way of your integrity, you're going to have a clear path. It'll be clear in the way that you know where you need to go, but it might be a difficult path to traverse at times. I think the other big thing, just as she talks about going towards your integrity and figuring out what that is like, by you figuring out what your integrity is and by ending your suffering, you actually end up ending other people's suffering. Because I think for me, like, I think about all of the qualms that I have with my day-to-day and like what I ideally would want in the world. And like I said, like, I kind of just want like a way more relaxed life, but I still want a fun job and I still want to be creative. And like, to myself from societal programming, I think I can look at that and be like, oh my God, that's really selfish of me. Like, that's not helping anyone. Like, what am I doing for the world? But it's like, by me doing that and living true to myself, I open up my job for someone who genuinely really wants that kind of career and to advance their career. All the people underneath me, if they want to advance their career, I need to figure out my next move. But also just like sharing it with people too is like helping. Like, I hope me sharing this with people is helping them see like, hey, I'm following my integrity, like, and it's making me happier, even if it doesn't feel like it's helping other people. Maybe this makes someone feel less alone. I always think about that with social media, because I'm like, man, if I would have had TikTok when I was a teenager, I think I would have felt so much less alone.